episode of the Following Upstream show. Today, we are going to talk about something that is just amazing and exciting about the idea and the notion that it is never too late to discover your passion and claim your voice. We have two amazing guests. One of them is Stephen Olson, who is a prolific screenwriter and playwright who didn't begin writing in earnest until 2014 while living in San Luis Obispo. Since then, he's written over 300 short and feature length scripts and plays, a body of work that speaks to both his dedication and creative courage. What's beautiful about Stephen's journey is how it unfolded accidentally later in life and without a grand plan, yet it has held an undeniable truth. He is a writer, a title he now claims with deep conviction. His story is a testament to the power of persistence, passion, and finding joy in doing what lights you up. Stephen, welcome to Flying Upstream.
I feel so much better about myself after that. Thank you.
It is all true of who you are. And another wonderful guest we have today is a woman whose story embodies resilience, reinvention, and the healing power of words. Christine Valentine, also known as Kino, is a multi skilled freelance content writer with a rich portfolio that spans articles, fiction, grant writing, and business content. But behind her professional success is a personal journey marked by overcoming loss, navigating mental health challenges, and reclaiming her life after escaping an unhealthy relationship. Rather than returning to the traditional 9 to 5 path, Christine chose to build something of her own, launching a remote writing business, pursuing design studies, and continuing her healing through therapy and creative expression. Today, she uses her voice to support others, advocate for mental health awareness, and craft meaningful content rooted in lived experiences. Christine, welcome to Flying Upstream.
Hello, welcome. And if you don't mind, I just wanted to say that my name is just Christine, and Kino Valentine is just my display name.
Okay, so should I be saying Christine?
Yes, I just use my registered business name because I don't like to give my dad any credit.
Okay, all right, totally understood. Thank you for sharing that. I want to get started at sort of the beginning, in a way, the beginning of where y'all are today. And what we can do is I'll ask the question, and then Stephen, if you want to answer first, and then Christine, if you want to answer, and then we can just flow. Um, what was the moment of realization that writing was going to be a significant part of what life looks like today for you?
Do you want to go, Christine?
Stephen?
Well, for me, it's like you mentioned, it started by accident. My son was getting ready to go off to college, and he had suggested possibly studying theater, but throughout his high school, I couldn't remember him actually being involved in theater. So we were living in a small town on the Central Coast, San Luis Obispo, and they have a little theater there that once a month they did what was called No Shame Theater. Well, basically anybody could come in, perform, or bring in something to be performed. So I asked him, I said, why don't we go to it a couple of times, see if you're interested? And we did attend a couple times. And I asked him, so are you going to get involved? And he says, no, I don't think I'm interested. And I said, well, I've been listening to these people bringing in their pieces, and it's sort of, I think maybe I could write something for this. So I wrote a monologue, and I performed it and brought it in the next month. And at the end of the show, the theater director basically said, it was a great night, and glad all these people participated. And they said, well, and what about that story Steve Olson did? And I never expected to get that kind of recognition, just from doing what I did. And it became this kind of adrenaline thing that I needed. And so I started writing a piece for them every month, and would come in and perform the monologues. And basically, that's how it started, doing monologues. And that eventually evolved into 10-minute pieces, because when we moved to Los Angeles, I got involved with another reading group there that performed original plays that people brought in. You would get the actors to perform it. We would go off and rehearse, come back and perform the pieces, and then have a conversation at the end. And I it I just kept getting these great reviews of what I had written, and it just, like I said, it became this kind of, I became an adrenaline junkie, needing to come back every month and get this support. And that's kind of how it started.
That sounds amazing. I mean, what talk about accidental, right? Like, and also it speaks to like the beauty of what the relationships with other people in our lives, in this case, your own child
Right.
can kind of bring you to. Like, that's so beautiful. What about for you, Christine? What was the realization? What was that moment?
Like to take the steps to work that I'm like taking today. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, um, the steps that made me take what I'm doing today is from my artist on my that I met on IG. He goes by the name of Kane, and he was like the biggest inspiration. I could see where I could have went a different route, and I didn't do that. And he was the big eye opener, and I owe him credit to the name Kino too, also. So thank you. But yeah, so that was my eye opener. There's other small key pointers that happened throughout the way as I became a small business owner. But yeah, that would definitely have been my first call that I would have to admit.
And what about that artist made
Um,
you decide or kind of become aware of this being the path that you were going to take? I'm always curious, like, what of somebody else's body of work kind of inspired us to move forward? What was that for you, if you remember?
it's just that we live in a world where a lot of people don't care. My
Mm.
joke to him was, if I ever got married, it would have been Michael Jackson. So I'm just put it that way. But so he I don't know, he just like he talked to me like a real person. And in our society, no artist just talks to people. So for an artist to talk to me, but then to like really talk to me, and it was a period like while he was going through stuff, he was like literally talking to me like every day. So before I like really got into therapy and took that seriously, because I one of my symptoms is like anxiety. And sometimes it would get like really bad and it would show when I'm talking to him, which is not ideal. Um, so but yeah, I can see where he like try to understand, because he has his own stuff he goes through. Well, we like in common we have like trauma, but other than that, like, you know, I don't know, he just treated me like a person, and he told me like kept reminding me like, not to give up and don't let people get in the way of anything. So even though I had a lot of stuff to like come like some type of closure, because have a lot of have a lot of baggage, but and like it does, like a lot of it doesn't go away, but you want to somehow trying to find a way to bring it to closure. But he was like the key person to help me like take it serious and get to that point, because I could have easily just brought my problems to like wine and stuff like that. So yeah, but instead I I'm a workaholic instead, and I do a lot of writing, rather if it's working, volunteering, or through just because.
So
Yeah.
had you done writing before you met the artist?
I've always been a writer, but I didn't have a chance to look into it professionally until COVID happened, and I wasn't able to get up to like flee from my unhealthy relationship until after COVID, because like people couldn't move and stuff like that. So I said, well, gosh, like I needed a better career than what I was doing in order to like, live on my own and everything. So I decided that that would be a perfect time for me to look into other stuff, which included me to go back to school. The old me, I wouldn't have went back to school. I'm not a fan of school, but I went back to school and I decided to become a writer. That was something I always was great with. I still have my grade school teachers on my social media. So I had to just think about how I was going to go about the writing, because my older sister was like, she was a professional journalist for 12 years, but I knew I didn't want to be a journalist. So, but I always thought it would be cool to learn article writing. So that was one of the courses I took, was journalism. But along the way, and also what makes sense due to all the stuff I had going on, and me knowing that I probably would need some type of help, I decided to do freelance writing.
That's pretty amazing. And I love what you had shared about, what got you to writing. It sounds like connection, right? Like having one person that you felt could see or hear you. And also, as you shared later on, just being able to acknowledge that it kind of made you evolve and become and do, like, go back to school and make decisions to change your life in ways that perhaps you could have dreamed of, maybe, but never actually thought possible. And Stephen, for you, I know that you began writing after retirement, so you kind of had like a whole career, if not multiple, before you landed on this.
Yeah.
How has that affected, impacted in a positive or in any way? Like, why and how much of writing you do now?
Well, the writing actually began before I retired. It was just after retirement I was able to actually devote more time to it. Whereas before it was just, working to make a living, to pay bills, to feed my family, and writing when I ever got the chance, then I would write. Uh, but the big difference between myself and Christine was writing was the last thing I ever thought I would be capable of doing, because I was a terrible student. And so I used to paint. That's what I went to college for, with painting. Uh, but we made a decision to move from the Central Coast to Portland, and I realized at that time I had too many paintings, and they weren't going anywhere, and I couldn't take them all with me, and I had to give away a bunch of them, and some of them I ended up having to trash, and that kind of killed my desire to keep creating more paintings. And so I think I was lucky that I fell into the option of writing, and then just got encouraged to keep doing it. But again, it was the last thing I thought I'd be capable of doing. It's worked out.
Yes.
You do script writing, right, Stephen?
What's that?
You do script writing, correct?
Uh, well, mostly they're stage plays, and COVID came into my life kind of like it did for you, because when COVID hit, a lot of the theaters switched to virtual performances. And since
Mm.
there's very low risk financially to put on a virtual performance, they were much more open to writers who had never been, put on stage before. Uh, so most of my writing came from filling those different theaters when they would put on a virtual performance. And because it was done on Zoom, I would write them more like a stage play rather than a screenplay. I have written a few screenplays, but most of my work is much more suited for stage and theater.
There's
Did
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Christine.
No, I was just gonna say that there's a writer that found me on IG, and he wants me to help him write a horror screenplay soon. So
Yeah.
That's amazing. Is that something that excites you? Like the idea of trying a new like type of writing, the horror script? Is that something that
oh, I do like I think he's seen some of my samples of my stories because
okay.
I have love stories, but I also have stories where there's blood and stuff in it. So I
Oh,
think he liked what he's seen, and he was like, "Hey, I want you to help me write this horror thing." Actually, like when it comes to watching films on TV, streaming, whatever, like my first go to is horror films. So I'm a big one of my favorites is Stephen King.
I love that. I love that. I think I'm probably one of the very few people walking this earth that has read no Stephen King books. So I know, I know.
What
Um,
about his movies? What about his movies?
nope, not one.
There's actually a movie called Christine.
Oh,
Or
it's pretty amazing.
Stand By Me. You've never seen Stand By Me?
No,
Oh, you.
Morgan Freeman.
It's a beautiful
no.
movie.
I'll
Oh,
have to Google it after this.
Yeah.
Morgan Freeman? No, you
No,
never. Oh
no,
my.
no. I read romance novels. I'll just say that for the public to hear. So.
I can give you a bloody romance novel, The Vampire.
Oh, this is hilarious. I wonder though, one of the things that I for creative for I mean, we're all creatives in one way or another, but how has writing shaped your creativity and your creative process? Because like I said, we're all creative, right? Like in whatever we do, there's some part of like some notion of creativity. But for each one of you individually, how has that shaped your creative process now that you do writing more consistently and more seriously and, at the new levels that you do it at?
And I think for me, because um, like I said, I used to be a painter. And one time to make ends meet, I was working for Kaiser Permanente in Los Angeles. And someone asked me, why do you paint? And I says, well, it's not something I want to do. It's something I have to do. And I think ever since I was a kid, having to create was just it was a passion in me. And
Mm.
when I sort of gave up on painting, I still needed that creative outlet, and
Mm.
writing just fell into place for me.
Did you paint like Bob Ross?
What was that?
Did you paint like Bob Ross?
I couldn't hear you.
Did you paint like Bob Ross?
Did I think like?
Bob
Paint
Wise. Is that what
paint
you
like Bob Ross.
Bob
Oh
Ross?
no. Mine
No.
mine. I guess were closer to like American regionalist painters. I did
Mm.
in LA. I was painting scenes with freeways in them. That was my motif. But
That's interesting.
I had worked with another artist. We put together a show together one time, and he says, now when I drive around LA, I look at the freeways and the arches, and I'm going, wow, that's one of the things that Steve could paint. And so he was seeing the LA scene a lot differently because of the images I was trying to capture.
That's really interesting. And it brings me to the question, Steve, of is that reflected in your writing? Can that be seen in anything that you write?
I think so, because for me, I don't write a genre. It's a story, and that story becomes the genre. So if it needs to be a ghost story, it becomes a ghost story. If it's a romance, it becomes a romance. If it's a comedy, it becomes a comedy. And it mainly just starts with a little spark of an ideal, like, huh, that could be interesting, and then it just kind of develops from there.
That's beautiful. What about for you, Christine? How do you determine, like, do you sit down with an idea of I'm gonna write, something in this genre today, or are you more of a let it flow free and what comes to you kind of writer?
It's a combination. I can relate to Stephen to a certain degree on what he just said. And then sometimes I might say, hey, I want to write a story and I want it to be about a vampire, but which angle to take? Yeah, I can do that. And then sometimes I still dream at night when I sleep. So sometimes if I have a dream, sometimes my brain will click and say like that's telling me like I should take this and put into a story idea. And sometimes, I don't know, being that, school part-time and everything, you see something, hear something, and then that's like a life in general. That's the story idea. I took things that I've been in my past that, like when I was very young and I first started dating, all the men that would like speak to me would lie about being in relationships. So I took that memory and turned it into a story, but the guy wasn't so lucky at the end.
And I think as writers, we're mainly introverted observers, and we store all that information, because I wrote a play and had it performed during the Carver City group. And so we performed it, that was probably about 12 years ago. But the story ideal came from when I was in college, and that was over 40 years ago. But it was just that thing that I had experienced, and it just, it was staying there in the back of my mind until I got to a point where, hey, I can use this now, and wrote the play. And I think we just continuously do that. We observe, we store it. Sometimes it'll, you know, the ideal will get us to write something immediately. Sometimes we just kind of put it in the back of our mind and hold on to it.
I love that. Is there a personal healing aspect to that and to being a writer in general then I would say?
And I think for Christine, basically because of what she said, and her background and her experiences, I can see her writing, if she writes about those things, as being this process of healing also. Uh, I'd have to say for me, I had an extremely boring life, which is probably why I didn't start writing until I turned 50. Uh, but what I have to tell people when I talk to them is, be careful what you say. It may end up in a play. So a lot of what I write about doesn't really come from my own experience, but it comes from just listening to other people. And a lot of it came from all of those groups during COVID, because they would give you parameters. This is what we want you to write the story about, and a lot of times that was enough to get me started.
What about you, Christine? What do you think?
I was first going to say, Stephen, like, this is what you use the power of fiction story writing for, because if your life is boring, you can take your fiction story writing and make it seem like your life is fun. So there's a combination of that I do with myself, especially nowadays. But then there's also the combination of I have written stuff of healing, do like my personal, like I recently had a Mother's Day poem published in someone's magazine, and it was personal, that kind of tied into my own story, and then I did one recently for Father's Day. So yeah, I do. When it comes to poetry, I do fiction and nonfiction, both writing. But when it comes to like storytelling, I love the whole fiction to it. However, a lot of times my story ideas may come from something that really happened, and then I just turn it to a whole fiction story. That's the only difference.
And I have written things that my wife had preferred me not to write. But no.
Oh, you must be walking around with a statement, some sort of statement that, be careful. This might end up
Right.
as a story that a lot of people read. I love that so much. As we get ready to sort of wrap up here, I have two more questions for each one of you. And when I bring up these questions, I really am really wanting something for the listener. One of the things that I love doing, and one of the things that I podcast, and Kristen and I started this podcast, is really inspiring people and helping people really understand that we each have the power within to create the lives that we individually want to live. And along those lines, it's important to me that a listener understand what that looks like. So that's where my next question is coming from. What would each of you tell your younger selves, maybe the ones that didn't yet know that their voice had value, in order to get them to start seeing that, to start understanding the value and the power that they have, the impact that their choices and not making those choices could have toward the collective?
You want to go, Christy?
Let you go because I'm still thinking about it.
Uh, I think for me, I spent most of my life living in doubt. And like I said, I was a horrible student. I would come up in the grades, and I would have teachers that my older sister had, and they'd look at me and go, "You're Stephanie's brother?" Because she did so much better than me. So I never really believed I had that potential, except when I was doing art. Um, so the only thing I could say is we're not going to live forever, and you might as well stop wasting time wondering if you can do something. You haven't failed if you tried to do it.
I love that. Thank you. What
The
about
best
you?
the best way for me to answer that question is that I feel like I spent a lot of my years wasting living what was my dad's ideal dream. Growing up, when I look back, I can see how it was like they came off like my household came off like it wasn't okay to like mess up or something like that. And as a child, because my dad didn't do the steps that he should have taken as a responsible parent. I wasn't able to like diagnose myself with ADD until young adults, so that kind of got in the way. I wasn't a terrible student, but I've also could been better at things or approached the way they should have been as a kid. Luckily, I recognized that before I went back to school as an adult. Because like now I'm on the dean's list for the stuff that I've been doing. But yeah, I pretty much want to put some relation to what Steven said. I was always personally told like what I can't do versus what I can do. And so now I don't like really have that in my mindset anymore. And a lot of times I just get up and I just do it.
That's amazing. That kind of leads right into the next question. The last question that I have, in that same tune, in the moments when you feel stuck, in the moments when maybe you sit down to write something and there's nothing that comes out that you think is worth of the paper that it's on. What do you what brings you back to the page? What brings you back to start putting something down and to keep moving forward, whether it's in your writing, as a business, or in your writing as, for fun, and um, to be able to put on a show for other people?
I, I think for me, it's being retired and not having a mortgage, and I don't have to think about this as an income. I can just enjoy it because it's a passion. Um, I still have ideals in my head that I haven't even begun writing yet, and it's just a matter of sitting down and writing them out. But I'm also involved in other projects that take my time away from the writing sometimes. I've got I'm going to be directing a play in August that for the first time it's not one of my plays, it's somebody else's. So I just keep grabbing any opportunity that comes along. But I've never had the issue about having a writer's block or anything like that. Once the idea is in my head, it just a lot of times it comes out on the paper all by itself.
I guess the question falls onto me. I answered that question. I'm pretty good though too, as well, Stephen, with where I, not too much having to worry about writer's block. What I can say is like sometimes if someone gave you a prompt and then they want you to write something off of that, that can be tricky sometimes. And then sometimes that I get a prompt and I just kind of go away with it, and you like really got to tell me to stop writing because I'll just keep writing. So, but yeah, there's no really solid response for that one.
I love that, because to me, what that means is that there's so much passion and creativity flowing that
Yep.
we don't have to worry about that. And I also think that's an important message to send across. So I want to thank you both. Before we wrap up, I'd love for each one of you to share where listeners and viewers can find you, if they're interested in checking out your work, if they're interested in reading what y'all write. If you want to get started first, Christine, where can viewers find you?
And you can find me on IG under Kino Valentine and Kino underscore Valentine. And also if well, I have a business number 669-832-6722. You can reach me that way as well. So yeah.
Wonderful.
And I'm the older generation, so I'm mostly on Facebook. But everything that I've been able to record is also on YouTube. So a lot of times just looking up my name, although there's several Stephen Olsons up there. That's where most of my work is. And also have a separate channel for LA Play Reading, the group that I host once a month through Facebook.
Beautiful. Thank you both so much. All of those links will be included in the show notes and in the YouTube description. We will also tag you, on YouTube, Stephen. And yes, for all of our beautiful listeners, as we wrap up today's conversation, I'm really reminded that writing isn't just a craft. Really, it is a mirror, it is a refuge, and sometimes it's even a revolution, depending on what you're writing about.
Right.
So whether it is, Stephen's work, whether it is Christine's work, writing can be your testimony. Writing can be your truth. It doesn't expire, and your voice doesn't need permission. So, as always, keep showing up, keep creating, and keep trusting that upstream pull. It knows where it's taking you. So, keep questioning, keep exploring, and as always, keep flying upstream. Until next time.